Today is the second part of our conversation with Pastor Terrence Hughes, pastor of the New Covenant Christian Church, Alpha and Omega Ministries. We're ready to dive in. We're excited you're here. So stick around as we help you unbox the power and potential of your leadership.
I'm Dr. Robert Davis, family life educator and leadership coach. This is my co-host, R.P. Soriano. Soriano attended Johns Hopkins Carey Business School, worked in the financial industry, and was an international consultant before partnering with me to launch UnBoxed to Lead. Me? Well, I worked for over 20 years as a senior pastor and a community organizer. Then I retired and started a leaders peer support community called UnBoxed to Lead. Soriano and I have been friends since the early 90s, and with our varied experiences and expertise, we help leaders reach the next level in their leadership. So join us for the next few moments as we unbox the power and the potential of your relationships, your leadership, and your life.
Welcome back, one and all, wherever in the world you may be. I'm R.P. Soriano, and with me once again is Dr. Robert Davis. We are continuing our conversation with Pastor Terrence Hughes. We're talking about social justice in the African American community, and we left off our last show asking the question, or Dr. Davis posed the question, what is the mission and the vision for the Black community? And that's where we left off our conversation, and we'll pick it up from there. Robert, go ahead and take it.
Yes. And one of the missions is for each of you who are watching this to make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. And please visit our website. It's www.unboxedtolead.com. That's unboxedtolead.com. If you are a BIPOC executive director of a nonprofit or community organization, we want to encourage you to check out our scholarship that we have for BIPOC leaders who are interested in joining a high-level community of other leaders so that you can pursue your personal, professional life goals, grow your organization, while at the same time creating a healthy workplace culture. So again, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. Now, we stopped and we were talking about that the African American community needs to have a vision, and it something clicked as Pastor Hughes was saying that, and that the thing that clicked was this: the "I have a dream" speech is often taken in isolation. But the "I have a dream" speech is a vision statement. And I did know that. I knew it was a vision statement, but I had an epiphany just a moment ago that the vision statement was that all of us would be equal. Then it begins to make sense, the strategies that Dr. King and his team were putting in place. In order for us to truly be equal, then everybody has to have a right to vote. In order for us to truly be equal, we should be able to attend any school that we want to attend. If we're really going to be equal, then we need to have, and this is where they were cool with all that other stuff, somewhat. Well, where he got killed was, he said, in order for us to be equal, then we also have to have an economic base. The same economic base that was given to peasant whites back in the 1800s as they came over here needs to be given to Black people so that we can truly be equal, because it's impossible to be equal when there is huge economic discrepancies. As long as, and I don't care how good of a person you are, if another individual has to constantly come to you asking for things, it's impossible to view them as equals. And so because we've been in a position we're always having to ask, we can't be viewed as equals. I didn't want to get off on that tangent, but he set a very clear vision for what were the various asks that he was going to have. I'm going to ask you to give us these rights. And so I thought about that within the context of the vision. And I said, wow, that is so important. So I think then that Dr. King has given us a tremendous vision for African Americans. And you said something a moment ago, as I turn it back over to you. You said something a moment ago. You said that what our forefathers coming out of enslavement had, which is the exact same thing that Dr. King was reiterating, is the same thing that we need today. So I think the next question is, when we talk about what does the African American community need, What then are the mechanisms and the steps to bring that about? Dr. King had some very clear steps. What are the steps in 2023 to bring that about in our community? I'm interested in hearing that before we start talking about emotions.
Well, I think they're the same as they were in 1963.
Okay,
I think they're the exact same, and they are the economic base, the reparation, the check that was never paid.
Yeah.
Right. That check's
that's my thing.
Due.
Yeah.
Right. That check is due. That is due. Everything that he had listed out. It was a reframing of the vision that hurt us.
Talk about that.
The reframing of the vision was it's going to stop at we're supposed to come together, little white boys, little white girls holding hands, and that's all we need.
Yeah.
Be cool. We're going to come together. We're going to just love on each other. That's the repackaging of the vision. That's the repackaging of the I Have a Dream speech. As you said, in its totality, it's a blueprint. It's a visionary statement of all the things that, not only things that happen, but actions that need to be taken. Right? And it's large, and you got to be able to digest that. But what happened was, my judgment, those who were able to benefit saw a way to benefit from that. You can't, that economic base is always powerful.
Yeah.
And as long as we didn't understand, as long as we still don't understand the economics, the economic machination that we need as a people to be sovereign or to even be in a collective. As long as we don't understand that, as long as we don't really fully grasp that, we'll be satisfied with the crumbs we get.
Yeah.
Robert, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I can take care of my family. You guys over here do what you can, but I got what I need to take care of my group.
Yeah.
And so it worked, just as I said, it happened in Africa all those years ago. It happened after Dr. King was killed, or not after, after Dr. King's time. And it's happening now. The same thing. We can't have the kind of political structure we have and individuals we have and still not have an economic base or understanding of economic power. How does that happen in this day and age? It has to be intentional. So we have to intentionally unlearn it. We have to be intentional about what we unlearn to re-identify ourselves.
Let me just jump in here and ask this question. Robert, you said you're reading the book on Reconstruction by W.E.B. Du Bois. Pastor Hughes, you're talking about this and how important it is that the African American community understands. Well, both of you have basically said this about the economic structure and why that's important. But Robert, you mentioned earlier that there was this window of time post-enslavement when African American communities were thriving, where they were building an economic structure, education structure. They were doing this on their own. Am I correct in that, right? I think they had, I would imagine that having been enslaved for so long, once you were emancipated, you probably don't want much to do with the community that enslaved you. And given the chance to build your own communities, it appears that that's what happened. Black communities, African American communities were thriving, and they were thriving on their own. What happened? Why did that cease? I think for people who don't understand the historical context of this, and they think that African Americans never had this, and for some reason can't attain it. What happened? Well, how did that window close? What was the thing that set the African American communities back so much that they can't seem to get back to that point?
Well,
what happened historically for those who don't know, for those who are not aware?
Yeah, there are so many different factors that went into place. I'm just going to address one. There was direct violence by both local, state, and the federal government to prevent African Americans from being able to build upon the wealth that they were accumulating and that they were trying to pass down to their children. I'm talking about the local, that's the city, the state and county governments, as well as the federal government, all conspired at one time or another to actually attack Black communities and to strip them of their wealth in various ways, whether it was to build, and this is violence, whether it was to build the interstate system right through Black neighborhoods so that their properties would be taken from them by eminent domain, whether it was just straight vigilantism that was sanctioned by local police and state police, where Blacks' properties were just taken from them, strong arm wise, whether it was, the redlining, so that you had railroads and toxic waste that was placed into Black communities. You had, again, local, state, and federal government conspiring together to stop. There's many different things I could share, but that's just one of the things that prevented it. And you can kind of understand why Blacks, by the time we get to 1960, were so exacerbated that if we can just live in their neighborhoods, then this can stop some of the bleeding. Maybe if we can just go to their schools, this will stop some of the bleedings. Because remember, as soon as Blacks would make progress, as we saw in the infamous bombing of Dr. King's church, as Blacks would make progress, there would be violent attacks on churches, on schools, on neighborhoods, with bombs, with shootings, with hanging.
And these churches and schools were in Black neighborhoods, correct?
Yeah, in Black neighborhoods.
Okay, so there were white people who came into Black neighborhoods and enacted this violence. So this is, I think, historically,
white-run governments. It has to be very important.
Government, right?
Because we try to make it seem as if this was just a group of vigilantes,
Yeah.
and that they came into the dark of night and no one knew what was going on. Maybe one or two police officers behind the scenes may have known something. No, this was governments, and I think Pastor Hughes is going to say something on that.
Well, that is also the political structure.
Yeah.
Because in that small period of time, Blacks were actually taking office in large numbers.
Mhm.
And so politically, where policy is made, that became very threatening. And so when Jim Crow came in and all that became illegal, they couldn't hold offices. They couldn't vote. They stripped all that out of it. So your ability to even govern yourself was taken away. We had in that small period of time of pre-Reconstruction, they were freed Black people, and I use the term Black, and back then they weren't using the term Black, obviously, but free Black people were taking those rights. They were running for office. They were winning seats. Yeah. They were being involved in the process. I told you the goal, the vision was to be whole. Yes. Was to be human, to be able to participate in all that you say this land allows you to do. And they did it. Yeah. And they did it in such a successful rate that they said, we got to take this away.
We got to take this away, yeah.
And we got to
see, and that's the thing.
Do both ways.
That's the thing.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that jumps out to me, especially when our fellow Americans have a hard time wrapping their minds around what racism looks like. They tend, especially for people who just cannot get it. They just don't believe that it is or it ever really was that bad. And I think what I'm experiencing here in this conversation is this deep contrast. After the Revolutionary War, white Americans, the colonies, like I said, they were able to set up a system and to thrive in that system after fighting for their independence. African Americans are emancipated, and they do the exact same thing. They go off into their communities. They build their communities. They do exactly what whites did after the revolution. The thing that they wanted to do most was to be able to govern themselves freely and to be able to live their life, the pursuit of happiness and freedom and all of those things. Black people did the exact same thing, but something different happened. As now American citizens, they were prevented from being part of American society and all of the things that American society that was rightfully theirs as newly minted bona fide American citizens. And I think people miss that gap. They miss that part where they did exactly what when we when we look at American history, the people that we give the most credit to are the people, whether it's immigrants, whether it was the founding fathers, the people who lived the vision, pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. They were given the gift of freedom and they took it and ran with it and did the most out of it. And those are the people that we lionize. And so we have, what a great story. I mean, what an incredible story that just doesn't get told. African Americans are emancipated and they create America 2.0.
Yeah.
They do it better than they did after the revolution. And that should be celebrated. And instead, they experienced acts of terror and systemic racism. And now we look back, and then what happens is you look back from today and people's vision is that, well, Black people just didn't try. They've always got their hand out.
Yeah.
You know, they why are they complaining? We gave them rights. We gave them the right to vote. And that little piece where African Americans thrived the American way gets left out. And I guess my question is, with all of that history in between, because you had a very unique situation where you're emancipated, you've got nowhere to go, right? You've got nowhere to go. So where do you go? You gel together and you work together.
Yeah.
But now we've had policies, as you've talked about, and we've had all of this history in between where there is a lot of division and there doesn't seem to be that let's all run together and connect and build this for ourselves kind of element. So how do we get back to that?
And that's, I'm glad that's a perfect transition. One of the things that we attempt to do at UnBoxed is to help leaders to become calm and less anxious, to recognize the emotions that they are experiencing, but not to be controlled by those emotions. And we believe that the best leadership takes place when the leader can be as thoughtful as possible. Pastor Hughes was talking about that just a moment ago. When a leader can enter into a thinking space and be intentional to be calm and more thoughtful in what needs to be done and what they need to be do. I personally believe that what individuals leaders need is also what the African American community needs. We have been attacked relentlessly. And we can allow ourselves to be very emotional and to be very angry about that, or we can do something else, which is to rebuild and to continue to grow. It looks like you had something you want to say. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just listening to you. I mean,
okay,
I agree with you, but it's about being honest.
Yeah,
right. It's about emotional literacy is one of the most underrated and undertaught thing in our community.
Exactly.
Emotional literacy and understand and how to be honest about the emotions you feel and honoring that where it's at, but then being able to move beyond that into a space where you're actually dealing with what that is, what the actual data you're dealing with, these different parts of communication.
Yes.
Right. And so as a community, as we're trying to grow forward, as we're moving forward, it behooves us to start to expand those who are not connected to themselves emotionally, who are not connected to themselves intellectually, even, and get them to start to raise the bar, right? Yeah. Start to raise the bar through community education, through things like what you guys are doing with your scholarship and with your leadership group. Yeah. There's different. I'm seeing a landscape. It's funny. I'm seeing a landscape on there. There are a number of organizations, and I'm going to move it back. There's a number of organisms that are now starting to function in the same wavelength of emotional literacy. Of how do we connect? How do we help clear this space? I was doing it with people who were recently released from prison, and part of the reciprocity in action piece was about bringing them, helping them to get whole with themselves and understanding who they are, the value they have. And once we start to understand the value we have as an individual and as a family unit and as a community unit, when we really start to see the value then we won't work out of a deficit model.
Exactly.
Violence is out of a deficit model.
Exactly.
You know, a lot of the things you see, what's the word I want to use? A poverty mindset is out of a deficit model, often based off of emotion, not off of data, in fact, but out of emotion of the situation, of the stress of it all.
Yeah.
You know, we are highly stressed as a community, and we have to spiritually. This is the worst time, I will say, as in the diaspora we've been as a people, spiritually.
Spiritually, yeah.
No matter your dynamic or involvement, spirit, this is the worst time we've been. Yeah. And short of that, we have no foundation, right? We have no foundation to really grab hold of during some of these turbulent issues. So you see these young folks who are now really lost. Yeah. They're really searching, and they don't know what to grab onto. They don't know what's real and what's not real. You're about to get me on the
well, you know, I want to say this. I'm writing down just a couple of notes here, but I want to say this. I want to ask you this. You know, you talked about spirituality, and it just so happens that our last show prior to this one, we had on James Sweat, and he talked about how his spirituality informed his corporate leadership. How that was an integral part of how he defined himself, and how he, you know, how would help to spearhead his guiding principles. And so, as we talk about African Americans, I heard it one time here that Christianity, in particular, has become nothing more in the Black community in 2020 than in the 2020s than a cultural religion. It no longer has this real depth. It's just a cultural thing that we do. So my question to you, and this is something I had in here, what is the role of the church? What is the role of faith in Black empowerment? What is that role? Because so many people now are saying that it really doesn't have a role, that it's a white man's religion. It's what is holding us back. And I can actually sympathize with that because there's so much historical data to support it. So how do you view the role of the church and the role of just religion, even outside of the church, and spirituality on our advancement?
I believe that the role of the church is super important.
Okay.
And this is coming from a person whose journey started out, whose journey is laughable, especially if you talk to my wife. She'll tell you the heathen stuff, boy, she's something else. But it's uber important. Yeah. The church is, I believe, and I'm using the context of the church in the broad sense. I'm not just talking Christianity.
Okay.
I'm talking talking Buddhist. I'm talking Muslim. I'm talking about the church universal.
Okay.
And I believe, because there's been a falling away from all of them.
There has been.
There's been a falling away from all of them. Now, Christianity is the one that gets picked on the most.
Okay.
You know, we ain't generally going out and hurt nobody after. You know, talk bad about it.
Yeah.
You talk bad about Jesus, you go have a beer with somebody down the street. You talk bad about Muhammad, it's gonna be some problems. It's gonna be, you say something crazy about Allah, you might go, ooh, yeah, it's gonna be some problems.
Yeah.
But I believe the church universal, and I'll bring it back to the Black church, which mostly will say Christianity. We'll go to that. Is uber important because, but not in the way that we've done it in the last millennium.
All right, talk about that.
Not in the way we do, because in the last millennium we allowed the world to shape it. Yeah. And we became, remember I said I'm from that generation that was brought up under Dr. King and that everything's okay. Well, that church was going through the same kind of dynamic. Oh, everything fine. You just got to believe in this. This is the truth here.
Yeah. And
I'm pointing at this white light here. That's the truth. And all you got to do is believe, pay your tithes, pay your money, and everything gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And no, that's not what faith is. That's not what really. And so then scandal comes into church.
Yeah.
Scandal comes into church in whether it's finances, through sex, through violence.
Yeah.
And we grab hold of. We're gonna protect our leaders.
Yeah.
We're going to protect our leaders.
The herd effect.
We're going to protect them. Well, we know what he did was wrong. We're going to pray for him. No, that joker need to be put out.
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to pray for him, but he needs to go to jail for molesting that little girl.
Yeah.
Yes. He the pastor's wife coming to church with sunglasses on all the time. Why? Yeah. Well, but that's the pastor. No, they need some help.
Yeah.
Where's the counseling? We took counseling out of the church. Well, the pastor does all the counseling. He's not equipped or qualified.
He's not a licensed.
He's not equipped. There's some things that I can do.
Yeah.
But most things, I need to say, okay, well, we need to go hook you up with some professionals.
Yeah.
You need some professional help. I'm a professional in this area here, not in that area there. I might be able to help you with this, but you need some intense counseling.
Yes.
And so the church has become everything it's not supposed to be. So that's why I said the church has to redefine itself. It has to find itself in the roots of the teaching, not of the cultural teaching. Not in the cultural teaching. We teach Bible bereft of culturalism. We say, well, what are we talking about? Well, that was the Jewish culture.
Yeah. That
wasn't the African culture. Now I'm using Africa back then, the term Africa, didn't they? But I'm just going a little deep. But that's about this group of people. And if we don't teach it right, if we don't rightly divide that word, we're going to kill somebody with that sword. And we've killed a lot of families. We've killed a lot of individuals, not rightly dividing that word. Yeah. And that's why I said but faith helps us with our moral compass. It helps us with a moral compass. And I say this, I was the moral aspect of the church for me when I was unchurched. Me helping people, me wanting to serve and help people didn't come out of the church. That came out of me wanting to help my people. Yeah. But as my faith grew, and as I started to understand really my role, my calling to do, to help and to serve, and that intensified, right? I'm no means a perfect man. I make many mistakes, and I repent a lot. There's a lot of crazy things go through this head sometimes, But when it comes to God's people, I'm very clear. I'm very clear on my role with God's people and the role of the church, and what the role of the church isn't.
Toward the end of my pastoral leadership. And I really have such regrets that I didn't have this awareness before I transitioned out. But toward the end of my tenure, one of the things that I recognized was the powerful potential that the church has in the Black community. And let me tell you why I say that it has a powerful potential. When you have a people who have been historically abused and attacked and targeted, it's very difficult to generate trust. And so with the church, you have a group of people that trust each other enough to socialize together, to fellowship together, to even pool their funds together. Yeah. My frustration has been that with so many of our churches, we have squandered such a great opportunity to do radical work. And I think that Dr. King and others of that generation were doing radical work. But I don't want to make anybody, I don't want to deceive anyone. The majority of churches, even back then, were not a part of the fight. Dr. King talks about that it was a handful of churches that were a part of the fight. Mm-hmm. But the what I see is that we have put so much of a focus on the religious entertainment part of which we refer to as worship. I'm using secular terms for others. Religious entertainment, which we call worship, where with the music and the preaching and what is going on what the secular would call the stage, we call it the pulpit. What's going on up on the pulpit, that we have become content and have stopped allowing the church to be that radical movement that organizes the people. So that is one of the things as we talk about Black empowerment, right, is that the church has to be the thought center for the community.
Mhm.
The church has to be the place. And I believe a lot of the disenchantment that we see is because, again, the church has been relegated to a place where I go to hear good music, good preaching, and to have a good time. Not a place where I go to tear down the structures that are enslaving and that are holding my people back and so many other people.
Right.
You know,
This is a fascinating perspective here, and I have to be the guy from the outside looking in, because I don't have I've never been a pastor, and I'm not I wouldn't consider myself a religious person at this point in my life, at least Christian wise. But I listening to the two of you talk about this makes me think about this whole. You talked about faith in general, Pastor Hughes. You talked about the world church, and I think about the role of Black Muslims in the 60s and the way that the Nation of Islam was structured. I mean, it's still pretty much structured the same way, really centered around Black empowerment. I think that's aside from the religious aspect, most of the conversations are about improving African Americans in American society. Is there something just unique about the institution of slavery and the way that African Americans were allowed to organize, or the way that they used church as a way to organize and to kind of handle not only their spiritual needs, but also the community and economic and all of these other needs, that they were just one place to be able to handle that also made that, a similar kind of it was able to be done almost in the same way with the Nation of Islam. And is it just something unique to the Black community with respect to faith, the way that it is used outside from other communities, used to organize, I guess?
Well, that's what we had to do.
yeah,
I mean, we're the only group that's brought here for this. We're the only group in this country that was brought here for the specific purpose to be bred, to be used for free labor.
Right.
Yes, there were indentured servants here. Yes, there were people who had to work off debts, who were not Black. Yes, there were people who came over here on their own volition. We didn't come over here on our own volition. You got to remember, the church also was used two ways. It was used in the very beginning to assist the master,
right,
in the dociling of the people on the plantation.
yeah.
But you can't break spirit. So although that's what it was used for, the people started having their own in-service meetings, if you will,
Yes.
to start to formulate escape routes, to formulate a better way to live, to formulate how we can manipulate master to not do the horrendous things that they're doing. So that's the impetus of the church. So it has both. It has both that issue, the area of freedom, and in the area of oppression, born into it from the beginning. So therein lies, as we move forward as a people in our different communities, the church being the center, because it started out as the center. The problem is that oppression weave was also born into it. Mm-hmm. So you have like I said before, you're gonna have that positive and that negative. So you're gonna have somebody in there trying to work that thing. I'd rather oppress somebody than be oppressed.
And I want to say this in 2023, because you hit the nail right on the head. As we look at 2023, you have an institution where you have 500 people, let's just say a church, 500 people assembling. And going back to what we talked about with emotions, the most that you're giving them when you're bringing them together, typically speaking, is encouragement to make it through another week. And that can't be all that is provided. You have 500 people together. That is an opportunity for tremendous economic empowerment. You know, one of the things, again, I talk about one of my shortcomings is that, you know, you think about how much money a church brings in and then how that money is spent. And I want to let everybody know this. Most churches, the overwhelming majority of churches, the pastors do not make the type of money that you think. There are only a handful. When you look at how many churches, it is a small percentage of pastors who make these exorbitant monies. Most pastors are working 2 jobs because the pastoral job does not pay enough for them to be able to provide for their family. So they have a full-time job and then they're leading a congregation. Or they just make the same amount as a school teacher leading a congregation. And so I don't want to get this idea. What I'm talking about is a lot of the money goes into the actual edifice itself, the building, the upkeep of the actual building, and the 11 o'clock Sunday service for Adventist Saturday Sabbath service. You know, a lot of the monies go toward that. And we have not, with all these brilliant doctors and lawyers and professionals, figured out how do we take these funds to do economic empowerment. Because as Dr. Claude Anderson said, he says, we take God's money, put it into banks that end up turning around and gentrifying our neighborhoods. That thing right there just crushed me. But of course, I heard all this after I left pastoring. You know, we take God's money, put it in the banks that turn around and then gentrify our neighborhoods. So we have to think, what is the most effective way to use this gathering of 30 people, 50 people, 100, 500, 5,000, so that we're actually making some kind of impact in the community? And I'm not trying to tell a pastor how to run his church, but if all we're doing is just giving people a message, a song to make it through another week, we have really failed at what the church was supposed to be about. And what the potential is so great, because no other institution, until you find another institution that will replace what the church is capable of doing, then you have to use the institution of the church to do it. And that is where you can gather communities of Blacks together with the possibility, should it be utilized, to make great transformation.
But you got to remember,
Yeah.
who the church is. The church is the people.
Yeah.
And it's the people who have, we suffer from the same idealism, negative idealism that people who don't want to be racist, right? The white folks, they don't want to be racist, but they've been fed a whole line of programming about these Black people for all these years.
Yeah.
And that you are lazy somewhat. You are making these bad decisions for a reason. We suffer from that same thing.
Yeah.
That same thought. Remember I said we have to unlearn some things?
Yeah.
We have to unlearn that about ourselves, because the truth of the matter is, most people who go to church, they don't want to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to work in the food bank.
They don't.
They don't want to come help support somebody else.
Yeah.
They don't want to spend. No, I just want you to give me a sermon on Sunday.
Yes.
And
a
I want
good
to go
song.
home. That's
Some
right.
good music.
And I'm gonna go home to my job and do my work. And well, why? Because life is so hard.
Yeah.
The life of a Black person, you got us on TV. Yeah, you got so many millionaires now, but that's not real.
Yeah.
That's really not real.
That's the anomaly.
That's the anomaly. And so, because of this oppression we have to unlearn how we see ourselves so we can come together as a collective.
Yeah.
You're 100% right with what the church can do and what it's not doing.
Yeah.
The thing about it is creating the dynamic in our churches when you start applying the principles you're talking about, that you're talking about learning in UnBoxed therapy, about emotional literacy, and all that type of stuff, and how to free yourself, how to see yourself as a real organizational leader, how that impacts the other people around you. Till we start getting some good teaching in these leadership roles, and we can spread that out into the congregation, into the people.
Yeah.
Then they start to see themselves as something that they never saw themselves as. And that is that we are all connected. That's why I use the term organisms instead of organization. Until we start seeing ourselves as organisms instead of organizations, we'll never come alive.
Wow.
You'll never come alive. You're going to do so much, and then it's going to stop.
So what I'm hearing you say then is one of the responsibilities of a pastor. It's not just to deliver the message, but also as he or she leads their congregation, is to create space for the members to think,
Yes,
to create space for the members to serve. Now, I will say this, 99.999% of pastors that I know try to create space for the members to serve.
Mhm.
I think one of the challenges is because we get so caught up as pastors in the day-to-day managing of the church. And think about a pastor that has a church of 150 members. That pastor is an executive director of a nonprofit that has 150 volunteers.
Mhm.
That's a pretty big,
Yeah.
pretty big responsibility. So, that's what pastors do. And I think one of the roles that pastors sometimes neglect because of all the other responsibilities that are put on them, all the responsibilities about counseling and visiting with chaplains that go to the hospital and to the nursing homes. We are counselors. I didn't use the word therapist, but we're counselors for people who are experiencing challenges and need advice in life. We are spiritual mentors. We pray, we marry, we bury, we pray, we do all that other stuff. And one of the things that sometimes get neglected is intentionally creating a space for our team, our members to think through, what do we need to do to empower the others? To empower the others. I'm going to keep on using that word,
That's
empower. Dr. Claude Anderson said, for those who are also asking, what do we do relative to the fact that we've been attacked so much throughout the years? Dr. Claude Anderson says, we have to continue to rebuild. If you look at an ant's nest or an anthill, if you go and kick it, they'll scurry and scurry, scurry. But if you wait for about 30 minutes or so, they'll be right back rebuilding it. You kick it again. You can do that 100 times, and 100 times they'll come back. And I know they're discouraged. I know they're depressed, but they'll continue to come right back and try to build back up that ant mound. We have to have that similar thought. We have been attacked, but we have to come back together. And I think the church is an integral part, an integral place to do it, to rebuild. We can't just say, man, they burned down Black Wall Streets all over the country. Man, they kept on, so many people from Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana had to move north, leaving their land and property because they were being lynched and attacked. And we saw, thousands upon thousands of acres of land just being, turned over from Black ownership into the hands of the state, which was back into the hands of white people because they had to run for their lives. We'll just say, okay, that did happen. But how are we going to rebuild again? Because there's going to be another attack, unfortunately. If America keeps on being America, there will be another attack. Then how are we going to rebuild after that? How do we continue to have that fortitude to keep building and rebuilding is so vitally important.
Yeah. And it's a matter of realizing that we've been doing that.
Yeah.
We have been those ants.
We have been those. I love that. We are those ants.
We are those ants, and we rebuilding. And now but now the world's starting to change, right? So the world is changing. We've been rebuilding, but now we have to rebuild differently. Now we have to start to rebuild differently. Yeah. And there is so much hope out there. Yeah. I got excited when you came into the city.
Thank you.
I got excited when you came into the city, if I could just be honest with you. I didn't know you, but Spirit led me to you. And I was just taking in you. You and I didn't go to dinner. You and I didn't have some epiphany where you and I were yucking it up. And I saw in you, I judge what maybe you didn't see in you. And when the Lord led me to have you specifically for that role, it's not by happenstance that you ended up developing and are still developing into the person that you are now as a leader.
Thank you.
And have made profound effects in this city that I would not have been able to do.
Wow.
I would not have been able to do. and you've been able to make these connections. You've been able to move this ball. I even remember when, I don't know if you remember this, but you floated part of your unboxed therapy stuff to me. And I'll be quite honest, I didn't get it. I didn't get some of this. I'm like, well, okay, bro, that's what you say. No, I didn't say, no, don't do that. I wouldn't do that. What you doing? You need to go back. No, I'm like, bro, if that's what you're being led to do, brother, then do it. If that's where you're being led to, I've always talked to you about your lead being led.
Yes.
I said, well, that's where you're being led to, then do it. And I believe, and that's why I say faith plays such a role for me, you, other people, whether they realize it or not. But it's also that understanding that I'm just a vessel.
Yeah.
You're just a vessel. And I can't be any greater vessel without you.
Exactly.
Right. And so you coming in to our organization at that time and me putting in that role, and when us talking, and we went through a lot of different things, a lot of different machinations,
Yeah.
if you will. But ultimately, it wasn't without it wasn't without. I had a mission, and the mission was about who we were as an organization and our effectiveness in the community, and where it wasn't effective anymore, right? And the mission was building this new team up that once I was out of office would still be able to move not my vision, but the vision God has for His people, right? And so I get excited when I just even in this dynamic with brother Raul and you, and we're talking this, and because this is what it's going to take to rebuild differently. We ain't talking the same old stuff, and we may be the ants, but we got to rebuild differently.
We got to rebuild differently.
We got to rebuild.
Can I just interject here because I could listen to someone praise Robert for hours because I think it's well deserved, even though I probably spend hours doing the complete opposite with him. But in all seriousness, it's very touching to hear this conversation and to acknowledge the work, Robert, that you have been doing and the impact that you've had in the city. And so I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to see that, and I second all of that. I definitely believe it's well deserved. But I just wanted to say something. Before we kind of moved into that, and then you came back to this concept of rebuilding and the ant hill. Sitting from the outside, as I guess ethnically from the outside. I mean, I could choose to identify as African or European, given my ethnic history, or I could choose to identify as either. I just tend not to, as either one primarily. But sitting from the outside and thinking about what America is and is supposed to be, I have to tell you, when I hear you say we have to rebuild, we have to rebuild, we have to rebuild, that causes or stirs in me a very feelings of just anger, frustration, and annoyance that a community in America has to continue to rebuild and rebuild and rebuild. That is fundamentally un-American.
Yeah.
And I just would hope that anyone listening out there who does not identify as African American, but who identifies as American, would catch that nuance and get to the point to where they would say, enough is enough. This community should not have to continue to do this. This is ridiculous. It just doesn't make sense. What community in America are we asking to continue to do this over and over again? No. We're not asking that of any community in America. The immigrants come to the United States and they're welcomed and they do what they're supposed to do. And there's no, this doesn't happen. So I'm baffled as an American citizen how my fellow Americans, how there's a segment of my fellow Americans who are in a situation where they have to continue to rebuild over and over again because the institutions are allied against them to continue to tear them down. This has to stop. Just on the face of it, just on the face of it as an American to an American. It just has to stop.
I know that we're up against the clock, and I want to say this, and maybe this will, and then I'll give Pastor Hughes a chance to close us out if he has any parting words. In that same book, Reconstruction, W.B. Du Bois says that the essential question that America's had to answer is what to do with Black people. What do we do with them? And I think that now that question has to be removed from America and centered almost exclusively among Blacks. What are we going to do with ourselves? You know what I'm saying? I think that some of our challenges that we've been asking America that question, what are you going to do with us? What are you going to do with us? Are you going to free us? Are you going to enslave us? Are you going to? That doesn't mean, and I want to make sure I'm clear about this, that doesn't mean that we do not continue to demand that America does right by Blacks. But I think that our conversation among ourselves needs to be, what will the Black man do with the Black man? What will Black people do with Black people, for Black people, by Black people, to empower Black people? That's why that's my closing thought on this subject.
I would say that that part of the W.E.B. Du Bois quote, and I've studied that question, and me and a group of men had bantied about that very dynamic.
What to do with the Black man?
What to do, and I too say that that's not really the question. If we focus on that question, then we will focus on the same answers that and tools that the oppressor has come up with. We will use those same focus, and we'll use the same tools as the oppressor, because therein lies the answer right there. But when we choose to redefine it, when we choose to say, well, what you asked me on the last segment, what is our vision for Black people? What is our mission as Black men? What is our mission as Black women?
Yeah.
Black people? You know, what is the whole? What's the vision and the mission as this collective? I think that's where we find the answers. And I think that's where we mine the possibilities of success and wholeness. Because we're not leaving that to anyone else to define. We're not asking them, and we're not even using their tools to see how we see ourselves. We're now utilizing the value system, and we have the answers. We have the answers. I reject that we don't know what to do. I will say that we may not have the courage, but I reject that we don't have the answer. I think we do. We just have to have the courage. And I have a judgment about, and this is I'll better stop there because I'll be on a whole nother show. But I'll say this: we have more than enough political people in offices who, if they chose to have courage, could have helped change the projection of Black people in America.
Exactly.
Had they had the courage, but they don't.
And there, my friends, is how we unbox the power and the potential of the Black community.
I wish, honestly, I wish, and I'm going to close out the show here, but I really wish, I really think, Robert, that this needs to be an ongoing conversation, regardless of where we are in the calendar. This can't just be a Black History Month conversation. The impact of this conversation and this topic on leadership. It's not only good for the Black community, it's good for the entire community. The community needs to hear this. The American community, Americans as a whole, from all stripes, from all backgrounds, needs to be, if they can't necessarily contribute to the conversation and contribute, within the inner circle, needs to be in on how this is being worked out. And I think that anybody who cares about their fellow American citizens is going to care about this conversation and how it speaks to leadership, no matter what your ethnicity is, and no matter what your background is, because this is a challenge for leaders, a huge challenge. You can think about any leadership role that you have out there. Imagine taking this on as your mission. Imagine this being the
Yeah.
thing that you had. Imagine this being the business that had to become profitable. Imagine it that way. Imagine if this was your business and you had to earn a profit, you had to please the stakeholders. Imagine being in the seat and doing this. So I think that this is a great conversation. I think it's edifying no matter what your position is. And so with that, I want to say that this brings us to the end of our show. Thank you once again, Pastor Hughes, for joining us today, and Dr. Davis, as usual, for your insight and your contributions. The Unboxed broadcast is produced by Bobby Davis Jr., graphics and video design provided by Damon Mace, and marketing and promotion by John Sedano. Remember to visit our website at www.unboxedtolead.com. For Dr. Robert Davis, I'm RP Soriano. We look forward to seeing you at the next broadcast of Unboxed as we help you unbox the power and potential of your leadership. Be well.
UnBoxed provides a full-service leaders peer support community that helps high-level leaders become more authentic leaders who build healthy workplace cultures and reach their personal life goals. To learn more and discover how we can take your leadership and your life to the next level, please visit our website at unboxedtolead.com. That's unboxed, 2, lead.com. Again, that's unboxed, 2, to lead.com.